Hello friends, it is Elagatua, and we are back with what should be a really exciting video. I've been kind of excited to show this game off for quite a while as we've been playing through it, and I know this one's going to be a good one. We are back with SC5 5. This is round 3, so we're still pretty early on in the tournament, but we're still early enough in the tournament that we're going to be playing some new maps that have not really been featured in Global League or anywhere else. And in the later rounds, often you get into the more traditional maps. But for now, we're going to be playing a new one called Dynamite City V2. This one is not too crazy, I would say, compared to some of the other maps that we've seen in the earlier rounds. Especially the round 2 map had a whole lot going on and was very large and kind of a horizontal front of contact with your opponent. And just looking at this one feels a little bit more traditional in its design, and there's just a little bit less going on, at least on the surface. But we will be breaking this one down in all of its glory, and there's actually a lot to talk about despite the maybe somewhat subdued appearance on the surface. So let us take a look at our bases. Per tradition, we have bases here and here, and then there's a neutral base over here that you can get to in 2 infantry moves from your base here, and then you've got a base here on the other side, and I should turn on fog for both sides so you can see what's going on. But the pre-deployed infantry starts there and can move down there. Let me just flip that on real quick. Okay, there we go. So when we look at reinforcement paths here, there are some interesting things going on that should be apparent if you take a close look. So this base is pretty far forward towards the south. This base is pretty far forward towards the east. And this base is farther back, but if you just draw a line to what you'd presume to be the 2 fronts of this map, you can see that this base is unobstructed by any sort of forests, and you can get out pretty much anywhere you want on the map without being slowed down by any of the terrain. And then over here, this base is going to be obstructed by forests to the east and to the south, so you're going to be slowed down a little bit, but it is just that one forest that you're going to be slowed down by. And this base is probably the most obstructed. It's very, very far forward, but you've got this pipe seam that is blocking your direct route towards the east front here, and then your most direct route by land to the east is blocked by a mountain. So you can actually push infantry over to this way very quickly, but until you break down this pipe seam, you're going to be forced to route vehicles around it. And actually, if you look at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, your single tank move is actually going to take you to here, and then once this pipe seam is broken, then your first tank move is going to take you all the way to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 to this line here. And when the pipe seam is down, there's also no obstructions at all. So this base becomes actually a really, really powerful forward base to be able to push units towards this corner. So this map is not like some of the other maps that we've seen lately where there's a lot of obstruction going on. This is a little bit more traditional where you can get units out on the map relatively quickly to where they need to go, and they're not going to have to path around like a ton of obstacles to get there, and there's not a ton of like chained forests that are slowing you down. It is pretty straightforward to your reinforcements. And when we talk about where you're reinforcing to, and we look at the fronts very briefly, the fronts are relatively traditional as well. You have kind of this empty center area, and then you've got a side down here with a lot of stuff, and then you've got a side up here in the corner with a lot of stuff. So very traditional layout and kind of traditional bases. That being said, there's a lot more going on here than meets the eye, even though it's kind of a traditional guise and a traditional layout. So let's talk about our ports now that we've talked about the bases. So we've got ports actually in the center of the map here, and this is a very interesting place for ports to go. And these ports are aligned directly along the center line of the map. If we draw a line down the center, you can see that that goes through both of those ports. So having the ports in the center is going to be very relevant because you also have black boats that start on your HQ. We'll talk a little bit more about this later when we start talking about the pre-deployed units, but you can see that the black boats can kind of come over here, and then they can go all the way up, and they can actually pass through this port here and actually get all the way into this area over here that's pretty far on the other side of the map. So ports are going to be pretty, they're pretty vulnerable, they're pretty exposed, and they're right on the center line of the map, and they're going to have some relevance when it comes to the black boats. More on that later. What I will say for now is beyond just the black boat that you start out with, this port is so far forward that in a situation where you get pretty far ahead in terms of income, the idea of a port battleship on this map, because of how central these ports are, and like not only are they central, they are forward. Having a battleship is far more powerful on this map than probably any other fog map that I have seen. Now, battleship is a serious investment in terms of income, but because it's so centralized, you build a battleship here, it's probably going to be able to shoot something the next turn. Because 6 squares, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it's a really huge area covered by a potential battleship, right? This huge chunk of the center. Anything in this area is going to be a potential target of a battleship, and it's just not really feasible for your opponent to clear out of this entire area of the map, because not only are all of these properties here in the top right kind of cut off from reinforcements, but even some of the reinforcement routes to the south on the other front are also going to have to be a little bit wary of the battleship's range. That being said, even the battleships are good. They are also very, very expensive. And they are very close to this airport here. Now, if you calculate the distance from the airport, which we haven't really talked about the airports yet, we'll get there in a second, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So the airport is not really close enough to easily threaten the battleships with bombers. Now, if you, for some reason, decide to move your battleship up, you would be able to move it up off the port onto this tile if you wanted, but there's a pretty substantial risk of doing that because then you are in one-turn bomber range from this airport. So probably would not recommend, if for some reason you're able to build a battleship, you probably don't want to be moving it off this port. But again, this is a very rare situation where battleships could potentially be a thing. It is kind of a finishing move if you're building a battleship. If you are not winning, you're probably not going to have enough money to build a battleship. And if you are, if you're losing and you try to build a battleship, then you're likely to kind of get run over. We'll kind of it relates to some of the front dynamics that we'll get into later on, but I wanted to spend some time talking about that because you don't see viable battleships every day, and this is one of the maps where it's not purely griefing yourself by building it, given the situation. So be aware of that. It's something to keep in mind. Let us move on to the airports. Airports are going to be very, very important on this map. So we have an airport up here, and then down here, and down here. These airports are incredibly far forward, and not only that, but you have airports on both of your sides. So air units are going to be incredibly important because they are a really, really fast way to project power onto a particular side. And the airport here is extending all the way kind of into these contested properties along the center line of the map. So if you look at the reinforced from this airport, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So even this property that is one tile away from the center line of the map is one turn copter reinforcement from this airport. So especially in the early game, you're probably going to be wanting to build copters pretty frequently because you can just reinforce copters to the front faster than you can reinforce vehicles in many cases. And when we get later on to thinking about COs, you're going to want to think about COs that benefit from building a lot of copters. Additionally, on the other front, so this airport is not quite as far forward and close to the contested properties. So if we look at this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So even the one copter range is not really able to reinforce all the way to these set of contested properties in the corner there. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we're getting to this line here. So it's not really able to very easily engage these contested properties either. So if you're just looking at it and you want a simple way to understand the airports, really this airport is going to be your offensive airport. It is going to help you secure these contested properties here. This airport is more of a defensive airport, and this airport is going to help prevent you from losing this line of like secondary contested properties, like stuff that your opponent might extend into if they're able to consolidate hold over this area. So both of the airports, though, far forward and much closer to the fighting than any of your bases. So even though this airport is stronger than this airport, you definitely are going to want to consider building potentially from both airports, maybe not at the same time, but at different times depending on the situation in the game and whether you want to push more offensively onto this side of the map or whether you want to try and slow your opponent's momentum on the other side of the map. Okay, next let's talk about the comm towers. So this is a 2 comm tower map for each player, and we've got a set of comm towers here and here, and these ones are kind of your standard comm tower placement where they're about 3 tiles behind the center line of the map. So they are, especially in the early game, relatively safe to be able to take, and you're often not going to be able to flip these comm towers unless you end up in some sort of either major advantage or if both players kind of commit really hard to the other side and don't really put much towards their defense, then potentially you could see those comm towers flip. Additionally, if you don't secure this comm tower early enough, you can put yourself in some risk of having it be denied, because this area here of the map and this mountain here, if you end up giving up control of this area, which is something that's very realistic to happen, if you don't already have control of the comm tower, it is kind of easy to funnel in infantry to prevent the comm tower from being captured with a pretty minimal commitment. So it is something that you can't sleep too much on. It is something that you need to make sure that you secure. But once you have it, it's probably not going to be lost unless you're really hard abandoning the side. So take that for what it is. Additionally, you have a second comm tower here in the corner. And this one is kind of interesting. It's a little bit of a pain to get to, because you have to send an infantry from this base away from the fighting in order to secure it. So oftentimes you want to delay this comm tower as long as possible, because in the early game, you really want all of your infantry to be going out on the map to capture stuff as much as possible so that you're getting as much income as you can. And then ideally you want to be finishing the capture on this comm tower like the first turn that you start actually fighting, but not before that, because if you capture it before that, that infantry that's there could have been out on the map getting you more money. So it's very challenging to strike that balance. And additionally, if we kind of zoom back in time here, one other thing that you have to keep in mind for this comm tower is that your opponent has this 1 HP black boat spy. And we'll talk a little bit more about the spy mechanics later on. But one thing that's relevant for this comm tower is that as the black boat is going back and forth between these two bases, if the black boat stops here on this, to be able to see this top base, it is actually blocking the path for infantry to go down to this comm tower. Now, it's not completely blocking it, because you can still go over the mountain. But if you go over the mountain, then your infantry is going to end up here. And then it's going to have to take a whole nother turn to get on top of this mountain. And then finally, it will arrive at the comm tower. But if the black boat is down here on the other side, or just out of the way, like it is here, then your infantry can go all the way to this tile in one move and then get to the comm tower one move sooner. So that's something that you want to keep in mind. Generally, people with the spy black boat are just going to be kind of moving it back and forth in the early game. So you want to have an idea of when you want to capture this comm tower and make sure that that time matches with when your opponent is going to be looking at your base in the bottom, well, the bottom kind of center base, instead of looking at your top base, so that your infantry can get to the comm tower more efficiently. Next, let's talk about the HQs. And I actually made a detour in my round 2 video to talk about this, because we saw a HQ cheese strat that's a little bit, I guess, in theory, it's FTA. I don't really think it's that FTA, but it's definitely FTA if you don't know it's there. So the play is basically you do what Orange Star is doing in this video, where you send your first infantry using the black boat on the HQ up to here, and then you put it on this city, and then if your opponent moves their black boat off of the HQ in order to do the same thing, then you just kind of walk on their HQ and you laugh as you win on day 5. There are a lot of ways to ensure that that doesn't actually happen to you. And this is, well, I think actually in this replay, like, I think Orange Star could have actually gone for the cheese in this game. So Blue Moon on this map actually kind of didn't play safe around this. But if you want to play safe around this, the solution for player 2 is you just change up your capture route so that you end up with an infantry on this city on your day 4, which requires you to delay, I think, one of your captures up here. So instead of getting this one, this infantry would instead come to this woods. Or maybe it needs to be a turn earlier. I forget the exact sequence, but the idea is that you end up with an infantry capturing this city on day 4 instead of one of these cities. And then if for some reason your opponent ends up going for the crazy play, you've already got an infantry here that can just walk over and interrupt it. And then the turn after that, you should basically always have a vehicle out that can finish off the infantry. You just really need to delay it a turn. And then if your opponent doesn't go for the cheese, then you just finish this capture and continue on, and you haven't really lost anything. So it is something that player 2 needs to worry about more than player 1. Player 2 can also kind of try the same thing, but it hits a day later for player 1. So it's more likely that player 1 would have a vehicle out. And I really wouldn't recommend anybody go for the HQ cheese line, because you're kind of, I mean, if your opponent knows what they're doing, it should never work. And you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot if you go for it and then you don't get it, because it requires, you have to basically send your first infantry from this base directly to the black boat to make it work. And you're kind of hurting yourself economically by doing that. And you can capture this city on your opponent's side of the map, but then you're very likely just to lose that city later on. So I think you're kind of trolling yourself by going for it, but it is important enough to talk about again, if just briefly, because I mean, you can't just lose if you're not playing around it. So just, especially if you're player 2, make sure you've got an infantry on this city on day 4. Or you can also choose to delay pulling your black boat off of the HQ until a little bit later, so that you're not at any risk of getting your HQ stolen away before the game has had a chance to really start. Otherwise, this HQ is relatively close to the center compared with most HQs on most maps. So if you look at kind of the center line here, from this lab, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to reach the HQ. So not to get ahead of ourselves, but it is somewhat vulnerable if you are facing a Sami, because 5 is the number of squares that a victory marched infantry can move. And so all that would require is someone having an infantry along the center line of the map to potentially reach the HQ, which is not that unrealistic of a thing to happen. So more on that later, but it is definitely relatively vulnerable in terms of HQ for Sami. For any other CO, it's pretty inconceivable that you could lose by HQ cap after the other than by the cheese. So vulnerable for Sami, not for anybody else. That's the bottom line. Okay, we're working our way through all the different things going on this map. I told you there was a lot to cover, and we still got some more left to talk about. Let us talk about the black boats. We got some pre-deployed units. So you got a black boat that's starting on the HQ. And this one is a black boat that can ferry units all the way up to here. And generally what's going to happen is you're going to ferry them up to the port. And this is the interesting thing about this map. If you look at the layout of the cities here, you got like a base here, and then this city's 4 away, this city's 4 away. From here to these. These are 1 square more than infantry can move because with the mountains in the way. So, and then this is another that's more than 1 infantry move away. So you've got a lot of cities that are kind of trolling you with their layout because they're kind of slow to shuttle infantry between. But then you have the corners. Actually, this whole center area here is very, very dense with a lot of properties that are all potentially chained together. So like this property and this property and this property, you capture this one and then you can move straight to this one and start capturing that, and you can move straight to this one and start capturing that. And if your opponent is AFK, then you could move to this one and start capturing that, although probably not in reality. But the idea here is that you have all these properties that are so dense and they're very efficient to capture, but they're very contested as well. So there's a lot of value in using this black boat to take units from this square, because this square here, if you move your black boat over, is 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 away from this base. So you can get infantry very, very quickly from this base over to the black boat, and then from the black boat all the way to the port. And then you can unload directly into this area that is very lucrative and very efficient to get a lot of the contested properties very, very quickly in the early game. So this is a very important concept to understand as far as like routing the capture order of this map. All of these properties that are kind of in your initial area here, and like this one as well, are kind of trolling you with how they're laid out. And all the stuff that you really want to chain around is a little bit more far forward. And if you want to be able to take advantage of that, then you're going to have to be utilizing this black boat on the HQ. So if you're leaving the black boat on the HQ, you're kind of griefing your capture order, and you're going to lose a tremendous amount of efficiency because you're going to be delaying your access to all these really efficient captures up in this area. And because this black boat is starting on this side, it really does mean that even though we talked about the ports kind of being along the central line of the map, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to split and be be very contested. And there is actually kind of a clear belonging. Like Orange Star in this map, player 1 owns this port by default, and player 2 owns this port by default. And that's just because this black boat can very easily funnel infantry up into that area. That being said, you can funnel infantry like over to here and then drop them off in the forest and maybe try to steal the port. But in practice, that's kind of unlikely to ever work. It's probably not something that you should try, because what your opponent is likely to be doing is going for these properties with a lot of infantry. And so if you try to steal this port yourself, what is very likely to happen is that you're going to get your infantry just killed off by your opponent, who's sending vehicles this way and infantry this way. So I would recommend focusing on the port that belongs to you. And then as a bonus, you're going to be able to follow up with a bunch of potentially safe captures, or at least efficient captures, in relatively contested territory. And so that's usually a good way to deal with it. So that is our black boat that starts in the HQ, but that's not the only black boat. We got to go back in time a little bit. We also have this annoying black boat that is the Spy. And this one is pretty interesting. It starts off at 1 HP, and it is going to be able to bounce between your 2 starting bases here for as long as you allow it to. or as long as it has fuel, and it's going to be able to see whatever you're building out of these bases until you get rid of it. And the way you generally are going to get rid of it is by building a tank from one of these two bases, and it doesn't really matter. Like, you can, if the black boat is here, then if you build a tank from here, you can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and you can kill it. And then likewise, if you build a tank from here and the black boat is here, you can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and kill it as well. But the problem is you really want to be able to kill the black boat when it's here, because it's more efficient for you, or I think more accurately, it's less inefficient for you to be sending a tank from here up to here, because then at least your tank is kind of closer to the fighting, and then you can even just continue to send your tank up here, and it's kind of like on the way. But if you're having to send a tank from this base or this base to this forest tile to kill the black boat here, well, you're basically moving it a whole tank move in the wrong direction. So you're pretty substantially sacrificing your reinforce, especially in the early game, which is when you'd be likely to clear off this black boat. You're really slowing down your reinforcements by a lot by taking the time to get rid of the black boat with a tank move if it's down here. Additionally, so even beyond seeing the bases, there's actually even more that you can do with this black boat to be really obnoxious. So we talked about how this infantry, you want to kind of wait for the black boat to be gone, so eventually you can path down here to get this comm tower. But the black boat, if it wants to give up on seeing the information from the bases, the black boat can actually just go to here and block this tile, and then the infantry has no way to get to this comm tower until they commit a tank move to get rid of it. So that can be very effective, and especially if you think your opponent is trying to delay getting the comm tower for a long time and you want to try and catch them, you might consider trying to sneak the black boat there as a surprise and force them to send a tank over to here, to this tile, to be able to remove it. And this tile here is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 away from this back base down here. So a tank from here is going to need 2 tank moves to remove your black boat here, which is really, really trolly. And from here, I mean, you don't want to send a tank from this base the wrong direction to remove the black boat. It's super obnoxious. So that, I think, is like an underrated quirk that you can do. And even if you are too late to stop the capture, you can, by moving it here, you can also lock the infantry in, because what's the infantry going to do? You can't escape that way when your black boat's blocking. Now, it is trolly, but by doing this, you are sacrificing the vision that you're going to be getting of the bases. So you can't really do it all, but that is a thing that you can do. Additionally, if you want to try and save the black boat for later, you do have this shoal that you can kind of hide in for a little bit, and that makes it really obnoxious for your opponent to try and remove. It's not impossible for your opponent to remove, because you can get like an infantry, on the comm tower, and then they can see inside and then commit a tank to here, but it's quite a bit of trouble. But that is an option, but obviously if it's in the shoals, it's not going to be able to see anything unless you're Sonya, I suppose. But if you're Sonya, you have different problems on this map. So it's not going to be able to see anything, but it will be safe. So there could be situations potentially where you want to save it for a later turn, and the vision on a specific turn maybe is not as important. So there's a lot of nuance to this spy, and it's going to provide you a lot of information early on. And in general, if you have a map where you see both bases early on, or at least 2 of the bases, and these are your starting two bases because the third base is not going to come online until a little bit later on. What this means in practice is that early aggro builds are kind of nerfed. The reason for this is that if you're going to be investing into like a day 3 recon or something like that, your opponent's going to know that it's coming. Now, they may not know for sure which front it goes towards, but a lot of the power of a day 3 recon build is that it's kind of a gamble. And it's a gamble that your opponent may be just hoping that you don't do. But if they know on day 3 that you've built that recon, it's a lot easier to change up your build and just invest in an early tank to play more defensively and limit the power of an aggro build. So keep in mind that kind of shifts our rock, paper, scissors diagram a little bit, where those early aggro builds, especially like the ones that rely on like surprise recons, well, it's not going to be a surprise recon. Could be a recon, still has their place in the meta, still can be effective, but you're not going to really be catching your opponent as off guard because of that spy. You can't remove the spy until you've gotten a tank. So that's not going to happen before day 5 or day 6 at the absolute earliest. And by then, your period of time for like a really early aggro build that's already closed. So that's all we have to say about the black boats. There is one other important feature of this map to discuss, and that is the pipe seams. Let's talk about this pipe seam first. This pipe seam doesn't matter. Great, so we're done with that one. Let's talk about this pipe seam. This pipe seam is pretty important. And as we talked about in the base discussion, once you've broken down this pipe seam, this base is able to project power, especially into this corner, very, very quickly, because your reinforcements. So if you look at the tank reinforcements from this base, without the pipe seam being broken, you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this entire area and even this, all of this area in the corner is 3 tank moves away from the base. Now the airport can alleviate that to some degree, certainly, but all of these kind of contested properties are going to be very hard to reinforce with vehicles while this pipe seam is still alive. However, once the pipe seam is gone, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Wow, that is a huge difference. Look at how much now we're covering in 2 tank moves. Suddenly, every single one of these contested properties in the corner of the map that is very densely kind of packed area of properties, all this is now within 2 vehicle moves from this base. So that is a massive, massive difference in your ability to secure all of these properties. And so what this means, as we will start to transition our discussion into how to lay out this map and how to kind of split the map and how the fronts work, is that this is a very different map when this pipe seam is there, and suddenly it will change the second it's gone. And when it's still there, player 1 has some power over here, but the second it's gone, player 1 is going to be fighting very defensively in this area because the reinforcements are going to favor player 2 a lot more, and vice versa in the bottom corner, where player 1 is going to have a tough time securing this area until the pipe seam is gone. But then once it's gone, then player 1 is going to be able to push very effectively and with favorable reinforcements, reinforcement pathing to this corner. With that, I think this is the perfect transition to start talking about how the map breaks down. And the fronts, strong side, weak side, and contested properties. So as you can imagine, if we look at contested properties, it's not going to be a huge surprise to figure out that these properties near the center line in a map that is kind of a diagonal split are going to end up being the most contested. But there's a lot of nuance to this, and this is another map that there's been a trend in map making recently, and I haven't been around like an incredibly long time, so I don't have a good idea of like the historical trends of maps, but I've been seeing a lot of maps like this lately, and I think this is a really good trend in map making that we've seen recently, where the zones of control will be a certain way early on in the capture phase, but then there will be some triggering event on the map, usually related to like a pipe seam breaking, which is the case in this map. It's not the only way that could happen, but that's a very common way. But at some point in the game, the balance of power and the territorial kind of reinforcements, zones of control, whatever, they change kind of midway through the game, and that creates a very dynamic map because you might be able to control certain properties on the map very early on because your opponent is not able to kind of get units there, but then later on they're going to become stronger in that area, and you have to try and hold on to those areas as long as possible, while at the same time trying to capture your opponent's areas more quickly than they capture yours. So I think we've seen this with a number of the Smacky Cup 5 maps and in some of the global league maps in this rotation. So I think it's a good recipe for interesting maps, and this map is one of those. And as we discussed, the trigger in this case is really this pipe seam going down. And so when we talk about like breaking the map down, you can't just draw one single line and say, okay, like these are player one's properties and these are player two's properties, because the dynamic shifts once this pipe seam breaks down. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to kind of draw a line of kind of early game expected map splitting, and then where I think things will kind of end up in the mid game and late game after pipe seams have been broken and the fighting on the fronts has kind of played itself out a little bit. So in the early game, I'm going to start drawing it kind of like this. Kind of like that. I think this one, you might flip that to the other side. This one's kind of a weird property, and it really depends on kind of who commits where and how and things like that. But the rest of these I feel pretty confident about. So in the early game, this is going to be how it shakes out. And so you can see that because these two properties here are very close together, but they're also kind of on opposite sides of the line of control, these are going to be very, very heavily fought over. And especially you've got this tile here, this missile silo, that's kind of connecting the two cities. So controlling that silo is going to give you a nice area to kind of assault either one city or the other, depending on who's controlling it. And that's going to be a hotbed of early fighting for sure. But now we're in day 10 to 12, for example. Let's say this pipe seam's broken down. Now all of a sudden you're looking at something like this. Where things have changed, and now really all of these contested properties in the corner are probably going to belong to player 2, and these ones are probably going to belong to player 1. And the interesting one is kind of these two. This one ends up being kind of one of those. This one's kind of hard to crack. This is probably like the least likely to flip out of all the ones that I circled. And this port can be kind of weird too, because you can defend it with the black boat. So these two end up being kind of sticky. But these ones for sure, not the comm tower, but these ones for sure are going to strongly belong towards, so this is P1 and P2. The gravity of the reinforcements is going to flip these corner properties towards that player. So this is very important to understand, because on its surface, you might think that this is a map where there aren't really any strong sides and weak sides, because this base can kind of reinforce both sides. And even this base, like, you can reinforce this side or you can reinforce this side. You're not really that restricted, or you're not really that obstructed. And even this base, like, it's not crazy to like send stuff over this way, especially if you got an airport to push. You might think that you kind of have free reign to just commit to whatever side you want, and that becomes your strong side. And that's just actually not the case. This map really does favor the strong side being this way and the weak side being this way for player 1, and strong side for player 2, weak side for player 2. And the reason is that you want to be pushing in the side where you have the most offensive potential to gain stuff. And so when we talked about like those zones of control changing, so your opponent is going to end up with a lot of these, or at least some of these contested properties early on. But then as soon as you break this pipe seam, you're going to have the offensive momentum to be able to try and steal them away. So you want to be committing offensively towards making that happen. You have the most to gain. And likewise, you are going to have early access to these properties up here, but then as soon as your opponent starts spamming copters out of this airport and tanks out of this, and the pipe seam's broken, you're going to have to try and hang on to as many of these properties in the corner and in the center as long as you can. So in general, you do want your offensive, your strong side to be your offensive side, and your weak side to be your defensive side. And that is by default. Like, you should expect to play defensively on your weak side, and you should expect to play offensively on your strong side. And if you don't do that, then there's a chance that your opponent's going to be doing that instead, and then you're going to be fighting against the way that the map is kind of designed to play out. And I mean, it's not impossible to do, but you're making your life harder. And if you want to be successful with that style, then you're probably going to have to outplay your opponent in other aspects of the game in order to make it work. So it's, even though it may seem like it's predictable for a reason. It's predictable because it's effective. So don't necessarily think that you need to fight against the way that the map wants you to play. You can kind of lean into it, and it works because it's good. And it's a good way to win, just by playing the map the way it's supposed to be played and doing it maybe more decisively than your opponent does. And you're likely to have success if you understand the way the map's supposed to play and by going along with it. Before we move on to CO discussion, there's one last thing that I did want to cover that I didn't mention previously. For some reason, I just memory hold this. There's a lab in the center of the map. This is your classic kind of tournament tiebreaker lab. But one thing to note about this map is that this center area here is very, very weak in terms of terrain. And you have the C tile here that kind of constricts it as well. So there's really not a whole lot of reason to have stuff in this middle area. And so you really just do see a lot of commitment either to like one side or the other. And there's not really a need to have stuff here. Like maybe you can put like a recon here to see stuff, but there's not really like, there's no reason to like fight over the center because it is so weak and constricted, and there's so much to fight for in the corners where you can gain cities and get an economic advantage, that this center area does tend to be a little bit of a no man's land because there's just no point. So that is a thing. One other thing that has struck me now, we should probably talk about this mountain. This mountain is actually a pretty important tile because it is very close to the center line of the map, and especially as you're pushing offensively in this direction, being able to hold this mountain with an infantry as a way to see into what your opponent is doing defensively is really, really powerful. And as you're playing defensively, you want to do your best to deny access to this mountain if you can, although it is, if your opponent has infantry on there, it can kind of be a death trap because you're going to need probably like a vehicle and an infantry to clear an infantry off of a mountain. And by doing that, you're putting vehicles here, which is very, very close to, well, it's within 2 tank moves. Right, it's on the 2 tank move line from this base once the pipe seam has been broken. So definitely, as you're kind of assaulting this side, make sure that you're grabbing that mountain. It's going to make your attacks a lot less risky, and it's going to prevent you from being surprised about what your opponent is doing, because you're going to be able to see like this whole area here where they're likely going to be marshaling their forces as they try to stop you from taking a lot of this contested area. Well, we're getting dangerously close to the hour mark, and believe it or not, we haven't even gotten to start talking about the good stuff. I mean, there's so much to talk about in this video. It's actually kind of wild. We're going to talk about COs now. And when I completed the Smacky Cup 4, I did say that in the Smacky Cup 5, I was going to... The shackles are off. I'm going to be maybe not playing as pure optimally as I have to, and I'm going to be willing to do stuff that is more experimental or maybe counter conventional wisdom, because I think that's interesting. It makes better content. It challenges the conventional wisdom of the meta potentially, and I like it. I think it's more fun to play that way, and I'm not... If I end up losing because of it, then I think that's fine. So I'm not going to be worried about that so much. And so this is the first map in the tournament where we are going to be doing that. And this is a fun place to try it out on, because this matchup is a tier 4 matchup for this round, but it is tier 4 with Lash. And Lash is traditionally a tier 3 CO, but for good or bad, Lash has been thrown into the tier 4 pool. And let me tell you, a lot of people have looked at that pool and not even given it a second thought and just been like, we're playing Lash. And on the surface, it makes a lot of sense. If you look at the contested areas, there's a mountain in a contested area. There's these chains of cities with a lot of high defense terrain and a lot of lucrative cities in high defense terrain. And there's forests where you can potentially get artillery value. There's grass everywhere, by the way. So there's plains all over the place. So Lash is going to have a lot of places where she will get that firepower boost. So I totally understand why the conventional wisdom is tilting towards Lash. However, I actually don't think Lash is super, super insane on this map. Certainly, Lash is good on this map, but I don't think that she is so good that anything else becomes unplayable. I think actually strongly against that. I think this map, like almost any other tier 4 map, I've said this a million times if you've seen my videos covering a tier 4 matchup, tier 4 almost always comes down to the player that plays better is going to win almost no matter what CO you pick. And I really feel like this map is exactly the same situation. And I want to spend maybe just a little bit of time on a little bit of like CO pick theory, because this is a good test case, I guess, for learning about how to think about what COs could be good on a new map where you don't have a lot of data to go off of, and think about, okay, like what, is Lash really all that good on this map? Like, is she really the only viable pick or not? So let's take a look at that in a little bit more detail. So if we want to understand that, we need to understand what makes Lash good and what makes her bad. So if you're not familiar with how Lash works as a CO, Lash gets plus 10% bonus damage for every defensive star on whatever terrain tile that she's on. So for example, cities are going to give her plus 30% bonus damage, plains are going to give plus 10% bonus damage, forests are going to give plus 20, obviously HQs plus 40, and mountains plus 40. So that's a lot of potential bonus damage. And as you can see on this map, there are a lot of tiles that are going to give Lash bonus damage. And for some people, Lash is kind of thought of as budget Kindle, basically, where she's very, very strong on the cities, but her powers are not quite as good, and she's not getting quite the firepower bonus that the Kindle does on the cities. But she is, you kind of play her the same way that you'd play Kindle, where you focus a lot on position play and try to fight around the cities to be able to exploit that firepower bonus. And that's not totally wrong, but it's not quite that simple, because the purpose, or the benefit of having firepower bonus is that you are able to destroy enemy units with less total attacks. That may seem really, really obvious, but it's important to kind of rethink some of the obvious things sometimes in order to maybe come to some unintuitive conclusions. Here, I'm going to pull up an image for you. This is a chart I pulled off of the Discord, and I think this was made by HW. I should look it up. I don't know. According to someone on the map committee, this chart was created by someone named HW. I don't know who that is, or maybe I do, and I'm just absolutely brain dead, so I apologize to HW. But thank you for this chart. It's very helpful. And if we look at this chart, unfortunately, I don't have the ability to kind of draw on it, but we can just look at it. So the way you read this is, if we look at the top left corner here, we've got 2 infantry attacking an infantry on planes is a guaranteed KO. And 2 tanks attacking a tank on a plane is a guaranteed KO, unless there's like luck involved or anything like that. So this is just like no comm towers, just standard stuff. And then as you increase the attack bonus, then you're going to get guaranteed 2-hit KOs on units in other situations. So if you have 1 comm tower, 2 infantry are going to be guaranteed to destroy an infantry in the woods. Tank infantry going to be able to destroy an enemy infantry on a city. 2 tanks destroy a tank in a forest, etc., etc. And so in most situations, when you look at 100% attack, that just means 0 comm towers, and 110% attack means 1 comm tower, and 120 means 2 comm towers. And then anything above that is usually more specialized, because you're not going to have more than 2 comm towers on the map. So the difference between 110% attack and 120% attack is actually very relevant, and this is a kind of a core thing that you need to know about Advance Wars if you're a newer player. Once you get to that 120% attack, 2 infantry are guaranteed to destroy an enemy infantry on a city. That's a very important kind of mathematical thing. Once you hit that 120% attack, it really simplifies a lot of the calculations, because below that, you could potentially need 3 infantry to remove an infantry from a city. But once you hit 120, it's only going to be 2. So what this means in practice is that you're going to be able to fight much more effectively once you reach that 120% threshold. Now, likewise, 2 tanks clear a tank on a city in 2 attacks as well. So that's another very, very important one. And all the other ones beyond that are much more situational. And once you get to like 130%, like it's not really a huge deal. Yes, your artillery are removing infantry on planes in 1 hit, but that's not going to be the majority of your fighting. Really, in Advance Wars, a lot of your fighting is just going to be attacking stuff on cities. That's like the most common situation that you're going to have engagement. So that 120% margin is very important, and you have to go all the way up to 140% before you start to see additional situations that might be relevant, where you get tanks that can one-shot infantry on roads. And then beyond that, then you have to get all the way to like 150% for tanks to one-shot infantry on planes. And there's more beyond that, but I wanted to highlight some of the most common situations. But my point that I'm trying to get at here is, once you reach 120% attack, you kind of have to go all the way up to 150% attack before you start to go from important 2-hit KO thresholds to important 1-hit KO thresholds. And so once you get to like 130%, like how much more do you really gain? Well, it's not a whole lot. You're still generally going to need 2 units to attack all the in all the situations that you would in a 120% attack. And sure, your first attack is going to do a little bit more damage, but it's not really that huge of a difference. And even 140% is not that crazy. As long as you're staying on planes, then you're still going to need 2, or if your opponent's on planes, you're still going to need 2 attacks to be able to remove enemy units. So much of Advance Wars and fighting and tactics in Advance Wars just boils down to having more stuff that can shoot at your opponent than your opponent has stuff that can shoot at you. It's purely a numbers game, and sometimes we get lost in thinking about, oh, like this unit has more firepower, I've got an extra comm tower, so I'm going to win the fights. But that's not always the case, because if your comm towers aren't actually letting you destroy enemy units in less attacks total, then it's probably not that relevant. overall compared to other factors in the game. And so people tunnel on that too much. And Lash on this map, I think, falls into this same kind of wrong pattern of thinking because it is a 2 comm tower map. You are already going to get to the 120% attack threshold, assuming you get your comm towers, regardless of what CO you are. And Lash is getting that bonus damage of 10% on most of the planes, but what does that actually get her? It doesn't actually get her to any relevant thresholds. Now, there is one very important threshold that she does get to, where if she's on a city, she got a tank on a city, she can one-shot infantry on planes. So that one is important, and that's one that, playing as Lash, that's one that you want to know about and try to take advantage of, because you want to basically set up situations where you've got a tank that's going to be on a city and you can one-shot that infantry on planes. Like, that's a very efficient way to fight. But that's kind of it. And additionally, if you look at the other features of this map now, I'm going to remove this this image here. If you look at the other features of the map, what do we have a lot of on this map that you're going to be fighting with? You have a lot of copters because the airports are so far forward, but Lash is not going to get that bonus damage from the copters. Bonus damage on copters is really helpful because copters often fight copters, and copters are kind of glass cannons where if you get the first strike into your opponent's copter, you're going to do most of their damage. And especially if you have, 10%, 20% bonus damage, then you can get close to like almost completely destroying an enemy copter in one hit. But Lash is not benefiting from any of that bonus damage other than just the comm towers. Now, that's not saying that Lash's copters are bad necessarily. They're still just kind of vanilla copters, but it's you're not really getting that synergy with the CO that you need. And that brings me to Lash's huge weakness, and that is her CO powers are absolute garbage. I'm trying to think of anybody other than Sonya who has, other than like Luxios, that has worse powers than Lash. Lash has some of the absolute worst CO powers in the game, and the way that this works in practice is that when you're playing as Lash against basically anybody, you have to utilize your firepower advantage to gain some sort of advantage relatively early before the powers start to come online. Because as soon as the powers come online, you need to already be winning. Because Lash's CO powers make you really like kind of invulnerable on cities, essentially. That's, more or less. It's kind of oversimplified. But Lash's reinforcement ability to kind of reduce the terrain effects to one movement, they don't really synergize with fighting well, especially not on this map, where all of the terrain that you want to be bypassing is directly next to the base. So you're not really getting much benefit from that on this map. And sure, you can be really strong on the cities, but it's not like your infantry are invulnerable. So you can't just like put infantry on a bunch of cities and be sure that those caps are going to go through, because your opponent can still send an infantry into you on the city, and maybe it's only going to take like 1 or 2 HP away, but it's going to delay the cap into the next turn, and then your extra defense is gone and things continue as normal. Now, it's not nothing, certainly, but it's not necessarily game breaking in the way that all of these movement CO powers are potentially much stronger. The movement power CO powers are very strong because you're getting that extra firepower bonus at the same time that you're getting those extra squares of movement. So you're getting more units to the fight, and then those units are arriving at the fight with a big firepower bonus. But the problem with Lash is that, sure, she might be able to get a big firepower bonus like in these areas, but the units that are getting to the front faster are the units that were built the previous turn, and they're not going to make it all the way to the fight in one move. So sure, they will get there faster, but they will arrive there in time to fight with the superpower being over. So there's just kind of a lot of anti-synergies for Lash on this map. And the maps where Lash ends up being very, very good are on maps with either no or one comm tower. And then that firepower bonus lets Lash get all of her stuff into that 120% attack bonus, where she starts to be able to kill units on cities in 2 when her opponent is only able to remove stuff on cities in 3 hits, and then that's when it really starts to make a big difference. But on this map, Lash has none of those things working for her. So anyway, that's not saying that Lash is necessarily bad on this map. Certainly she's very good, but I think a lot of people just saw her and auto-picked her. But there's a lot of anti-synergy for Lash on this map, and if you're playing Lash against pretty much any other CO, you really do have to win the early game. Otherwise, things could get very dangerous for you, because all the other COs are either going to have, most of the other COs are going to have either bonuses to their copters, like Jake, Adder, and Cole are all going to get movement bonuses to their copters, and Adder's going to get, in some cases, firepower bonuses from Road. Jake's going to have a lot of, like, the grasp bonus, the planes bonus for copters, very, very strong. And we haven't really talked about Sami yet. We will. It's going to be so long before we actually start the replay review. I'm so sorry. I'm not, though. But yeah, so all these other COs are, and not Jess, obviously, but I don't think this is not really a great Jess map, I think. But all those other COs, like their copters are getting a lot of bonuses, either in movement or firepower. Lash is not getting any of those things. And copters are such a big part of this map that I think a lot of other COs are viable. I've seen some Adder picks. I think that's totally reasonable. I think I saw a Jake pick, which is also, I think people at the time were like, well, you picking Jake? Like, you crazy? And no, I think Jake is completely reasonable on this map. And Sami. So now I think maybe we can start to talk about Sami. Let's get into the game. Let's do that first. How about that? So before we get into the map proper, we can take a look at the COs in the top right. As you can see, I am playing Sami. That is fun. The old traditional Sami versus Lash matchup. I assure you there is going to be very little traditional about this game. And that's what we're here for, right? Like, we finished Mackie Cup 4, so now we can have some more crazy games with maybe some innovation. So we're going to be experiencing that in this replay. And we'll kind of be talking through the opener that I've designed as we go along, because it is going to mostly play out, unlike some of the other games that I've covered recently where I talk about my brilliant plan and then none of it actually happens. This one, for the first couple of turns, like maybe 7 or 8 turns, it's pretty much going to go more or less how I originally designed it. So as we talk about it, we can I kind of take you through the thinking as we go along. But I did come into this map with basically a very clear idea of what I wanted to do, and so none of this is really like on the fly for the most part. And I will take a second to mention my opponent. My opponent is named Ambition, and they're honestly a very strong up and coming player. I am not familiar with this player in any of my previous matches, but they've put together a very good record. I think there are something like 110 wins and 25 losses or something like that. Overall ELO of like 1,500 or so, but split across all the modes. So not necessarily a fog specialist per se, although looking through their recent games, I saw wins against a number of pretty well-known players. If I take a peek here, maybe I can scroll through. Won a game against Laska Larnar on eye-opening. It's very, very good stuff. Took a game off Starflash. Won a game against Muji. Yeah, there's some pretty good name. And I'm just like scrolling down, you know, from the most recent. So like a lot of really good fog wins recently for this player, and so I definitely was not going to take this player lightly, even though I don't know too much about them, because it seems like they've been doing very well recently. But we've got a plan here, and I'm so excited to explain what I had in mind here. This, I'm going to hype it up a little bit, all right? So you bear with me. In some of my other matches recently, I've kind of gone into them having like a bad feeling of like, I got this plan, but I don't really know if this is going to work out. It's kind of a lot down to luck. In this game, I felt like there's no way that this plan is going to fail. I felt so confident that this plan, that this opener was going to be insanely hard to beat, that I was like, once I had finished mapping it all out, I was just like, this is going to be insane. So let's start walking through it a little bit, and we'll go over all the reasons why this thing is nuts. So first of all, we don't need to move our black boat yet. I don't really care what my opponent is doing for the first couple of turns, because I know it's just going to be infantry, so we don't bother. And we're just going to be doing standard stuff. Start off with, do this capture, going for the neutral base. Nothing too exciting yet. All right, now the excitement starts. So we are going to be sending this guy over, and this guy is going to be heading up to this area. This is not an attempt at an HQ cheese. This is actually designed to get this port and have the capture completed before any possible day 3 recon can interrupt it. One of the things that you will see as Sami is a lot of early aggression with recons. And again, we talked about this in the map breakdown, but on this map, because you have the spy, early aggression is not as strong as it would be on other maps. And so that kind of makes Sami better than she would be on other maps. Because on this map, the thing that you would often do to punish Sami is not quite as good. Nonetheless, we are kind of anticipating the possibility of early recon harass, and so this timing is designed to make sure that we lock down this contested property relatively quickly without fear of harass. And if there's no day 3 recon, then great. Infantry is already here, and it can chain into these other lucrative properties as well. We are going to take a small economic hit to do this because we're not getting this city as fast as we could otherwise, but that is okay, because as long as we're being mostly efficient, we can afford to skip a city like for one turn or 2 turns, as long as there's a payoff later on, as long as we're getting income from those investments. And also, we're going to be moving this infantry over. So let me pause and see what this infantry is doing. I've forgotten all the details already. There's a reason for the madness. Yes, now I remember what I was doing. I'm actually not going to explain why he's here. We will save it for a couple of turns. It will make sense. It has to be the way that it is. and just accept it, and we'll revisit why shortly. Okay, and black boat moves over, and more infantry as well. And now this is the first turn that our opponent could be building a recon. It's our day 3, not their day 3. So we're moving it here so that we know, okay, if you build a recon here, I'll know, and then next turn I'll move it over here, and I can see this one, so we'll just know for sure if a day 3 recon is popping out or not. The black boat moving back and forth. We see an infantry here. I really should have moved this guy back as the first move, although I think because I'm getting this infantry to this port so quickly, I actually kind of don't care if there's a day 3 recon. He goes there. He goes there. Huh? So my infantry got lost on the way to the city and decided to go to the mountains instead. Question mark, question mark, question mark. I promise I'm not trolling. And no day 3 recon, which is not that surprising, because day 3 recon wouldn't be surprising me because I can see it with the spy, and this guy is just, he's gonna be heading over to here. And more infantry for me. So this opener it's a little bit weird because I'm going to this property earlier than I would normally, and then I'm skipping some of these properties that are like really close by. This is one of those situations where it is a little bit inefficient, but a lot of the income is like deferred. It's not lost. Like, I'm not losing a ton of money. I'm kind of delaying the money for later turns. And so it actually ends up being okay as long as your build is not reliant on having early vehicles at a certain time. So you're sacrificing your ability to access certain vehicle timings by doing this, but overall you're not really crippling yourself as long as it's leading to some efficiency later on. So don't be afraid necessarily to shift your capture order around if there's some kind of reason. And we'll be seeing that reason very, very soon. Okay, so we see the day 4 tank, so that's very good information. And day 4 tank is the earliest that our opponent can possibly be getting a tank out. And what this means is that our opponent is just doing kind of the most straightforward opening possible, which involves infantry capturing, just the cities immediately around. One thing this does mean, though, that is very interesting is that it kind of signals to us that maybe they have left their black boat on the HQ. And I didn't really talk about Sami that much, so let's take a moment now that we've reached this point to talk about one of the reasons why I really like Sami in this build. And that is, in the map breakdown, we drew this line. This is the line of being 5 tiles away from the HQ. HQ capture in the mid game and late game is a very, very real threat if you're playing against a Sami. And so I thought that by picking Sami, my opponent might be concerned that they would be leaving their HQ too vulnerable by moving the black boat off. Additionally, I am player 1. And player 1 has the possibility of HQ cheese. We talked about that in the map breakdown, and even in the round 2 video, I talked about that. And with Sami, the HQ cheese is especially potent because you can't really defend against it with just infantry. You would need at least 2 infantry in position to be able to defend against that. And unless you're really altering your build, you're not going to really have that. And additionally, we know our opponent is not altering their build because they were able to afford a tank, which requires you to basically do the most efficient capture pattern possible. So what this means is that we can assume with all these things combined that there's a good chance that the black boat is still there, because if the black boat was moved off the HQ, then it's basically a signal to us that any attempt to capture the HQ with a cheese build would just work. And we're giving our opponent some respect. We assume that our opponent is aware of the cheese build, and I mean, maybe they're just thinking that I wouldn't go for that, but more likely is they know that they're safe from the cheese build because they left their black boat on the HQ for all the reasons that I just described. Now, so we're just kind of keeping that in our back pocket, but this is something that I had hoped for from the very beginning, because when you sacrifice, you sacrifice the power of moving your black boat down in this area. So that means you're delaying access to these properties by being safe and leaving it on your HQ. And that is something that my build is hoping for. More on this later, but important to keep in mind. So the fact that this tank is here is a strong indication that our opponent has not moved their black boat off of the HQ. Fog is fun, guys. All right. Now, day 5. Now is when things get fun. Are you ready for something crazy? Here we go. Boom! It's an APC build. Yeah, I was so confident that this was going to be a winning build because nobody has tried this. I'm completely sure. I'm not completely sure, but I'm very, very confident this is a 100% Elagatua original build. Nobody has come up with something like this before, and at least not on this map. Like, obviously, this is not the first APC build that's ever been tried, but I'm pretty sure this is the first APC build on this map done this way. And APC build, I mean, this is, I'm telling you, this build is malice. It is absolutely disgustingly devious. I'm going to explain all the ways in which it is absolute mental torture for anybody playing against this build, and especially anybody playing against this build who's never seen it before, which my opponent is in that unfortunate position in this case, because you all are seeing it for the first time, most likely, if you're watching this video, and my opponent is playing against it for the first time in this map. So let's talk about what the APC build does. When I was exploring different opener options on this map, I did note all of kind of these properties, like this one, and this one that are kind of like annoyingly 4 moves away, right? Four infantry moves away. Obviously, infantry can only move 3. And I was like, man, wouldn't it be great if I could get like an APC out and get a ton of boosties and turn that 4 in, or turn my 3 infantry movement into 4 infantry movement and get to a bunch of cities more quickly. And then I realized if I do that, APCs for Sami have a ton of synergy with Mechs, because if I'm building the APC, not only am I getting the synergy from like getting to some of these properties more efficiently, but in the medium, in the mid game, then I already have a transport out for my Mechs. So who does that work out really well for? Well, Sami, obviously. And additionally, Sami gets 1 extra movement on her APCs. Not only does that apply to the black boat, but it also applies to the APCs, and we'll see the advantages of that extra movement in a lot of ways in the coming turns. But that's not all. Not only are we getting the immediate synergy, as you'll see in a moment, of efficient movement. That's right. Build the APC and boost the infantry on the same turn. Thank you, Rip, on Stalingrad, your build. Super sick, inspired that little quirk. So that's why this infantry had to come to the mountain instead of getting the city. So we get this boosty. And this boosty, now he's on the mountain. He can get here, and he can get here. And then we're going for this corner really, really efficiently. So that's not something you see very often. But there's another reason. Not only efficiency, synergy in the mid game, good for mechs, but also deception. Because if you're playing against this and you don't know what's coming, on day 5, you see infantry from these two bases with your spy. What do you think the opponent's going to be going for? Well, 1, you're probably confused. But 2, you might think that this is actually a tank build. Because that is the normal thing that you, well, it's not really that normal, but if you don't see anything, that is the other major possibility. If you're not aware that an APC build is a thing, and APC build, until this video goes live and people see this replay, is not really known to be a thing on this map. So you might think that this is just a safe build for Sami, designed to prevent any sort of recon harass down here with a tank. But you don't know, because the vehicle's been built from this base the spy can't see. So if you're playing against this for the first time, you might assume that this build is actually a safe build designed to protect Sami from aggression, but it's not. It's actually a greed build, and we're going to be trying to exploit our opponent's fear very, very heavily. So look at it, like all these things are working together. It's got early game efficiency, it's got mid game synergy, and it's got early game deception, all on day 5. Oh, it's just getting started. You think it's getting crazy already? Oh, just wait, it's gonna get more crazy. It's gonna get more crazy. It's not, all of the malice of this build has not fully been revealed yet, not even close. Anyway, so one little tidbit. We move the lander. We're just moving him back into the shoals here. Based on our opponent's income curve, the next turn is a 8K turn, because we kind of know like how much money they can have based on seeing the tank. So that means the next turn is either going to be it could be an artillery from here to start busting down the pipe seam, or it could be a recon from here to either pressure one of these sides. Truth is, we don't care. We don't care what it is. And the most important thing for us actually is we want to keep the spy alive for a little bit. So we don't want to move it here, because then the tank actually can come and just kill our spy. And it's like relatively efficient. So we don't want to give our opponent that option. We want to make it absolutely as obnoxious as possible to get rid of our black boat. And so in order to do that, we need to hide the spy this turn, and then later on we'll have the option to pop it back out and be annoying in different places. So we're not going to give it the spy efficiently. All right, so now let there be efficiency. Boost him over. Now we're getting the black boat value. He can go here next turn. boost him. So now he can go here efficiently. And that's why this capture order had to be kind of weird, where we had to like delay moving the city. And so I said I would tell you later why I kind of went to this city instead of capturing stuff. And so like he went here and then all the way up to here in a weird order. It's all to basically optimize the movement of this APC so that I have infantry. So this guy had to finish the capture of this city on a specific turn so that he could be ready to get boosted to here. And now this guy had to be delayed because now next turn, this guy is going to get shuttled with this APC. So in order for all this stuff to be like in the right position to make all this happen, the ordering had to be set up in the way that you've seen here. So just take it for what it is. And now we can move this guy back over and we see an infantry, which doesn't really tell us that much. It just tells us that either it's a recon here or an artillery here, most likely. I guess in theory it could be a recon here as well, but I think that's less likely. And now we are going to build a recon and a mech and an infantry. And now our opponent is like probably like, what is this build? Day 6 recon? I guess it still looks like it could be a tank first build, right? It could be a day 5 tank from this here, and then you follow it up with a recon here. Like, it seems like it could be plausible, but it's not. That's not what it is. Okay, so we still don't see anything of note here. But we're going to move the recon, and where this is going is we are setting up for a incredibly strong push over here. And the reason it's so strong is because Sami, unlike other COs, doesn't actually need to break this CO or to break this pipe seam. Because Sami's got mechs. Mechs don't care about this mountain. So Sami can get the benefit of fast reinforcements to here without having to commit to break down that pipe seam. That is yet another reason why Sami is quite strong on this map. So she doesn't need to commit to building that artillery and spend time breaking down the pipe seam, when other COs are going to need to do that in order to unlock their offensive potential onto this map. And now the timing is starting to reveal itself. So if you're looking carefully at this map, you can probably start to see the elements of this build starting to come together. You can see that we are basically hard abandoning this side. There's nothing going up here. Instead, everything is going to be going down here. And the way this is going to work is this guy is actually going to go over here. And this guy is going to go over here. And we're going to take these very, very quickly. We're going to try and basically secure these, not with being able to defend these properties. It's just pure speed. We're just going to try to get to these properties faster than our opponent expects us to be there. And then you're going to see a really crazy timing when we try to start taking this property. We'll get there when we get there, but that's the plan. And we needed to get this port early because this black boat is actually not going to be super useful for us in terms of transporting units, because we're going to be transporting a lot of units this way, but the black boat goes up. So it's not really going to be synergizing with our plan. But this black boat has a very, very important job. Very, very important job. Because we are hard committing this way, we have very little ability to defend this side. And especially, we're going to have very, very little able to defend these properties. But you know what is really, really good at defending ports? Black boats. So this guy, his job is just to sit on the port and be there so that I don't have to defend this side, because this is the most contested property, but if my opponent has to clear a black boat off of it, that's going to take forever. So I'm hoping that this black boat can just sit here and dissuade our opponent, or at least slow down our opponent from exploiting our incredible weakness that we're going to have up here long enough for me to just completely overwhelm this entire area. And we can do this because we're going to have a lot more power than our opponent is expecting on this side. You're going to see how it's going to turn out. It's going to be pretty nuts. And we don't have to break down this pipe seam, because we are going to be leaning heavily into mechs and transports. And our opponent comes down, sees a mech. Like, can you imagine playing against this? Like, what is this spy? What has he seen? He's seen a recon, and now it's a day 7 mech. Like, what is this? Can you imagine like going against this for like your first game on this map? Like, this must look so weird. So we see an infantry from here, and we feel comfortable moving the black boat to this square because we know that there was no tank here the previous turn. So again, this guy, he has one job: to be annoying and to not get sniped by a tank on this tile. And actually, so we see this infantry here. So now we're like, okay, fighting is going to happen soon. I don't actually care what is being built, but the best use I can get out of this guy is actually to potentially block the comm tower. If for some reason my opponent's played greedy, I can potentially lock down this comm tower for a while and maybe delay its capture until after some of the fighting's happened. And if not, then he can just chill and be annoying and lock in an infantry, because it doesn't actually matter. This is going to sound crazy. It doesn't actually matter what my opponent is building, because your Lash, like, it's going to be tanks and recons, and they're probably going this way. And if it's artillery, then the artillery is going to hit the pipe seam. So I'm going to know about it anyway. Like, it just doesn't matter. Like, I don't need to know that you're building tanks and recons and anti-airs eventually. It's day 8, so maybe it's probably a little early for anti-airs, but like day 9, day 10, like there's going to be anti-airs built. Like, I don't need to know, but I can definitely get value out of this black boat just by blocking this square. At the worst case, I'll be locking in an infantry, but it's better than nothing. Anyway. Build continues. So now I'm going to go for my comm tower now that this black boat is out of the way. Get a little boosty into the forest, although it's not really going to make anything better. And now we had to build the mech a turn early so that we can get him loaded into the APC now. So you see this is all choreographed to be exactly the way that it was. And this guy, so now you can see, so this APC can go back here, and now this mech and this mech, I can boost them both, and they can, now they'll be on this tile. So this is all planned this way from the start. And now this black boat has made it onto the port, and thank you, black boat. Your sailing services are no longer required. You are on vacation in a war zone. Stay there forever. Notice we don't actually attack the pipe seam. We just don't want to give any free information away. We could chip it down to bring it within 2 artillery hits, but it's actually it's more important that we kind of don't tip our hand, because we're setting a gigantic trap, and you'll see next turn. We build an artillery here. This is actually not necessarily to kill the pipe seam. Like, we might consider it if we get the opportunity to, but this artillery is actually primarily for supporting our attack on here. And we know that Lash wants to really control this section of like the L-shape terrain. And so the artillery is going to synergize with the mechs, and basically we're going to build this wall and just have like a lot of infantry in the way, and then the mechs and the artillery are going to try to basically suck in units to force them to overextend into our territory, and then these guys are the power for the counterattack. It's kind of a similar idea if you're playing as Grit, if you have the misfortune of trying to make that work on a fog map. Grit is a counterattack CO, so you have to kind of lure your opponent in, and then once they're committed, hopefully you have enough stuff left over that you can just absolutely decimate it. And if you do, then suddenly they don't have enough stuff to basically ever do enough damage to you, and you can kind of control whatever area you want. It's a kind of snowball situation, but you have to build up enough power in your snowball that your opponent can't run you over. And Sami is a very similar way, but Sami's going to be doing it with mechs primarily, with assistance from other vehicles that are supporting that. And especially, you have to get the investment early on with a lot of transports so that you can get enough mechs to the front line to kind of overwhelm your opponent's initial buildup of recons and tanks. And if you can get enough there by like day 11 or 12 and you're not crippled, then there's a good chance that you're going to be able to build more powerful units over the course of the game, because you can spit out a bunch of mechs every other turn, ferry them to the front lines very quickly, and then invest that extra 4K that you're getting by not buying tanks and spend it on air units especially, and that will let you get more infantry out, which you also want as Sami. So there's like, Sami likes maps with a lot of airports, especially forward airports, because investing in air units lets Sami build more infantry, and it's pretty obvious why Sami wants more infantry. But there is a period of vulnerability for Sami early on where she has to invest all those funds in transports and not early vehicles, and so Sami can be vulnerable to getting run over before that mech snowball has built up. But on this map, we have set this build up in a way that, because we commit so hard to this side, so hard to the strong side, I don't actually think there is any way for Lash to be able to build enough stuff where Lash could actually run us over. And you'll see next turn when everything gets in position. It's kind of a crazy death ball that we're assembling really, really early on. So we are a little vulnerable down in this corner, but it's kind of unlikely that our opponent is going to harass us down here, because even if for some reason there was like a recon on day 5 built here, and it goes all the way down here and sees our stuff, from what the spy has seen, like for all he knows this could be a day 5 tank build, ready to ready to punish any sort of early recon harass. So I feel like the odds of this working are just like really high. Like the window of vulnerability for this build is so tiny, and you almost need to know that it's coming in order to be prepared to counter it effectively. And nothing happens, which is exactly what we wanted. And now everything's perfect. We are ready to set everything up. It's all been building up to this turn. We kind of took our corner properties, we got away with it greed. It's not even like that insanely greedy because these properties are not like especially vulnerable. But now this is when the build is online. Like we are ready to go. Check this out. So this guy is the bait. What we're hoping for is that there's like a recon that was built here, and then it's like somewhere in here, and it sees this, and we're actually hoping that Lash is like committing a bunch of stuff this way. Like we want to fight here. So we're hoping that Lash will be like, oh, look at this juicy missile silo that I can put a recon on and interrupt this harass. Oh, I didn't even mention this, by the way. Actually, before we get there, we see this port was untaken. So this is basically proof that the black boat is still on the HQ. And so now I'm like, okay, we have a chance to potentially take this port, but we need to be patient because this turn is the trap. We don't want to like spring the trap too early. So we're going to be ready to like fight for the port, especially if now an infantry shows up next turn. We want to be ready to fight for it, but we don't want to like go in on the port and then like our opponent sees us capping the port with an infantry like on this city, which there's really likely to be, and then like sends the recon to like kill this infantry. Like that would ruin our trap. Like we want the recon to come fight this guy, and you'll see why right now. So first of all, we send this guy over. We're not capturing this because this would be a free dude. Because we have, like, we can't hold this city. Look at what we've got up here. We've got 5 infantry and a black boat parked on a port. Like, we can't. There's no reason to even go for this. We need our infantry to stall and play defensively. And actually, when I look at this, the reason that this guy is here is actually to see the comm tower, because what would be really bad is if we spring the trap on our opponent down here, and then our opponent realizes, oh, Sami doesn't have the comm tower. I'm just free to like, that Lash is like free to attack the comm tower and deny it. So we're actually going to pull this infantry off the city to get this comm tower this turn, because now we ideally next turn is when we show off like what we've been preparing for. And if our opponent doesn't know that we're actually really weak up here, then by the time they find out, I'll have the comm tower already and I can just play defensively. But we're sacrificing 1k income to do that. But we're removing a potential vulnerability where if we don't get this comm tower, like we may like never be able to get it. So it's actually way more important than the 1k to get it this turn, because next turn our opponent's going to know that we probably don't have anything up here if they see all the stuff that we have down here. But we can just follow it up with this infantry, and so it's still kind of okay, because it's 1k that we lose, but paying the price of 1k to secure a comm tower that we'll have for the rest of the game, probably worthwhile. So now, double boosty, mech hidden in the forest, ready to counterattack this tile. Mech on the plains, kind of baiting. If there is... it's hard to imagine there being like an infantry on the mountain, but If for some reason my opponent is able to see this mech, maybe they'll want to come in here. Recon up here. See that this city is also not taken? That's kind of crazy. I was expecting that city to be capped for sure. So, I mean, now we know 1,000,000% that there's Black Boat chilling on the HQ. And now my eyes get big and I'm just like, whoa. Oh, this, as my son says, this, yow. This could be mine. I've already got these. Look at all this power that I'm projecting over here. Now this recon could potentially deny this. So we're going to be setting up now. Now that we know that our opponent needs to capture this city also, now this guy is going to be ready to pounce. Because we can get the recon here and get the infantry here in case something comes here. And then we can deny this city, and then this guy is set up to capture the port. We have like a big ambush where we're creating this window where our opponent's not going to expect us to be so strong over here, we're hoping. And by the time they realize it, I've already got their port. And then it's just way too late to do anything about it. And from there, like, I'm already securing an income lead if everything goes to plan. Everything's just kind of hidden back. And now we've got this T-copter online. And you can see the power of transports for Sami. T-copter being here, a mech built from this base is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Oops, that wasn't even that. So a one-turn mech is moving all the way to here. That's crazy. It's the center of the map in one move. And copter. Look at all this stuff. This infantry is, I was like, please attack this infantry. Please attack this infantry. Please attack this infantry. Look at all this. So, like, it's covered by the copter, it's covered by the tank, it's covered by 2 mechs, it's covered by the recon. That's why I don't care what is being built. What could attack this that I can't counter? I can counter vehicles, I can counter copters, I can counter infantry, I can counter anything. It doesn't matter. Anyway, mechs, mech. And this turn is crazy. Copter, mech on day 9. APC going to be able to come back here. And this mech will move on the mountain. And then I'm going to get more mechs down in the bottom left corner. The 4 mechs online. You can't build that many tanks. It's just more mechs than you can do anything about. So recon shows up down here. That's annoying, but I kind of don't care. Like, it'll delay, so I can't take this city anymore, but it's also not fighting me. So this infantry comes in here. Okay. Well, I do love it when a good plan comes together. Free dudes. Free dudes. So this is our timing. We've been setting up the whole game for this. Our guy didn't get attacked here, which is what can you do? You can't. It's not perfect, but at the same time, like, we are so ready to fight here. We are so ready. We don't care what is there to meet us. We are going in. But first, we get our comm towers. So now, I'm like, it's really good that we have this comm tower now. Because if we had to start capturing this comm tower this turn, in vision of this infantry here, like, the fact that this infantry is here suggests to me that our opponent is just going to be pushing this way with everything. And maybe this is just like a weak side recon to like try and stall me. That's what you'd assume. Like this is like a very confident infantry. Because he's already crossing the center line. So generally when you see a confident infantry like that, it's because that infantry has a lot of vehicles behind it ready to shoot you if you just try to stop him. So that's kind of telling me something. Which makes me even more confident that I'm just like let's go. Time to fight. Both comm towers, by the way, captured the turn that we start fighting. We talked about delaying this comm tower capture until the most efficient time to get it is the turn that you start fighting. Well, we did that. So in we go. We see a tank down here. Normally, a recon attacking and seeing a tank would be a bad thing, but we do not care that this tank is there. I am not afraid of this tank at all. What is this tank going to do? Haha. And now we take the port. This is our port now. Bring in the tank. What is this tank going to do? Free dude. We don't need to finish this capture because we've got another guy to come behind and finish it. This is all about timing. We are surprising him, and it's not like a slow push where we're trying to establish dominance by clearing out a ton of his units. We are ambushing him, and we are taking the maximum amount of things possible. And if he doesn't have like a perfect counter ready this turn, he's going to lose like every single contested property on that bottom left side of the map because everything is just, I've prepared all my infantry to be here ready to pounce. And now he's down to infantry and it's all going to belong to me. And I kind of don't care what happens after this. Like after this, we just fight to keep it. And maybe we can potentially even push this comm tower, especially if our opponent is kind of consolidated up here, which now, I mean, seeing this tank is a beautiful sight. Normally, you wouldn't want to see a tank with your infantry that comes to interrupt. But now, I mean, look, now we know our opponent's spread out. This tells us everything we need to know. And this is the power of deathballing in fog. Because I am so undercommitted up here, the fact that this tank is here and these two vehicles are here means that I know exactly where I'm at. It's like a poker hand where you have like really clear information based on your opponent's actions about like what they have. Like you either, it's like you sometimes it's when you have nothing, right? Like you have to like, I have to bluff here or I'm going to lose. Like you kind of know exactly where you are in the hand. This is not exactly quite like that, but we know where we are. We're always going to be stronger up here, and we're always going to be weaker down here. And the details don't really matter. It doesn't matter that we don't know exactly how much weaker we are down here. We know any fight that he takes down here with any of these vehicles is going to be a mistake for him. And we can bully him. He can't fight us here. So we're just going to capture stuff in his face and let him deal with it. And we're not even going to bother clearing this infantry off because where's his infantry? I mean, obviously two of them just disappeared, but this is so few infantry down here. But we know that he has the same amount of infantry, or he's Lash, so Lash has the same amount of infantry on the map that we do, for the most part. Well, if they're not there, they're probably over here. So I don't really want to trade away my infantry, of which I have so precious few of on my weak side, because they're all over here. So all I want to do is I want to slow this down as much as possible. And if we're lucky, this guy is going to be able to retreat away. But I'm kind of expecting like these two guys are probably dead. And we're just going to have to fight to hold on to the comm tower. and try to stay back and maybe hold on to this city. But I mean, if we lose this city, like we live with it, right? Like it's not too bad. We got his port, so we're already looking like really good. And even though he's blocking this city here, I mean, he's not going to be able to block it next turn. This tank is going to force him off. So the corner is going to be mine. So, like, worst case scenario is a 2K income lead based on the capture by day 10. So it's like, we are winning this so hard just based on the cap phase and the initial engagement. Like, it's tilting so strong in our favor, and there's a tremendous amount of upside. Third mech over here. Like, what can you do against this? So we move this guy over. This is not really a true retreat. I'm just kind of repositioning him so that he can go onto the city next turn. And we deliberately move this mech into vision in the somewhat unlikely hopes that my opponent will be like, ooh, it's a mech. I'll send my recon in. Unlikely to happen, but hey, can't win the lottery if you don't buy a ticket, right? APC comes down, another mech, artillery in position. I mean, what do you do against this? This is way too much stuff. Even if Lash has everything here, there's no way that this can hold against what I've got here, because the Sami, the mech reinforcement from this base and this base with the transports is just so powerful and so like efficient economically. Once the snowball starts, it's just brutal. And now we're gonna invest in 2 recons. We want more recons because it is possible that Lash could just kill this recon with the tank. The tank will one-shot this recon with 2 towers and the planes bonus. If that happens, we will probably be getting the tank in trade. So it'll still be a good trade, but we'll want to have more recons available. And we want to have some vision up here because we want to kind of stall this and be able to make good decisions on the weak side. So looking forward towards that, that's what our deploy is going to be. But I mean, it's crazy, you know, like copter, recon infantry, like we're able to just get so many units out because we're investing heavily in the air. And so that's letting us get a lot of infantry, which has synergy with our CO in case you have been asleep for the first 10 turns. So we'd love to see this. The tank comes down to finish off our infantry, which means that this is going to be another 2 turns before we lose this city. So that's even more time lost for our opponent in terms of tempo. Our opponent is like giving us way too much credit over here, assuming that we have something that can potentially fight into the tank. So opponent's playing very, very safe. And unfortunately, as Lash, like, you can't afford to play this passive because Lash needs to be winning before the CO powers come online. Lash has no comeback mechanic. Lash's CO powers are not going to flip the game on its head. Lash's CO powers can solidify a game that's already tilting in her favor, but it's already looking like really, really, really bad, even though there's been very little fighting. How is Lash going to end up winning after all this trading is done? So Lash just backs off, which is probably the best thing that Lash could have done. And now it all belongs to us. So we finish our captures, and we're just going to take the rest. Up to 23k. Now we've got this mountain position. It's really just a really strong position to hold. And so we see this line here. We had thought about potentially, like, okay, can we take this comm tower? Now, we don't need to take the comm tower. The comm tower, there's no need to extend into this line. We've got everything that we want We have all the contested properties down here. And we've got both of the center properties on the other side. So if we capture this, we're going to be up 4K. And then all we do is we make a lot of copters. That's all you have to do. It's once you have more money as Sami, as long as you're not under like imminent pressure, it's a snowball because you're going to have more stuff. Especially when you have the transports online, you can just keep investing in mechs. Like there's no way that your opponent can build enough vehicles to be able to fight into your army cost effectively once Sami is ahead by a decent amount. Normally Sami has to fight for that kind of advantage, but when you win the opener hard enough, stuff like this can happen. So now we send the recon center. What we're interested in primarily is this going to be a front shift over here, or is it going to be a front shift over here? Because we know that Lash is spread out. So to me, the only viable plan for Lash is all in the comm tower. And so I think shifting this way is probably what is going to happen. And anything else probably is just not going to work. So we don't really need to prepare against it too much. But anyway, we're going to go take this property. This one's going to be hard to secure, but we have like perfect information about where our opponent's stuff is. There's no infantry that can deny from this direction. And we see pretty far on this side too. We see nothing here, here, or here. So based on this, the only thing that could possibly interrupt a capture on this city is some kind of vehicle. We'll be ready for the vehicles if they come. So that's makes us feel very safe. Based on what we see, we know that the recon has to be in these woods. That's the only place it can be. So it can watch us capture this property in the bottom left. But even if the recon comes down and attacks, we're Sami. I don't believe the recon can do enough damage to prevent the cap from going through the next turn. And put the mech here. This is what is known as bait, as you can see. Okay, let's talk about positioning here. So this is kind of a technical turn. We are anticipating a big fight for this comm tower and maybe this property. So what we're doing is we're starting to pull our mobile units over here to help stall out that push that we're expecting. At the same time, we know that we're going to finish this capture. There's actually no need to really commit a lot to the bottom left anymore because there's nothing to gain, and our opponent is clearly set up to defend their comm tower. So that's fine. We will let them keep their comm tower, and we're just going to take all their money. This mech is set up in the unlikely event that some vehicle comes down here to interrupt this capture. This mech is going to be covering that. We've set up this mech basically in deliberate vision of the recon that we know is in this forest to see if maybe we can get a vehicle to commit in here. But we also know this mech is covering here. This mech is covered by the artillery. this copter is covering all this. This tank is covering all this. This copter is covering all this. This recon is covering all this. So even though we're thinking ahead to basically fighting up here, we can't really front shift the mechs. So if in fact there's a fight going on over here, we're just gonna finish taking this and we will just retreat everything, and then all of our mobile units will basically go over here, and then we need to start building up the mech snowball on the other front. We can't get these guys over there. That's not gonna happen. But we're gonna end up with such an income lead that given enough time, and by enough time I mean only like one or two turns, we can shift all of our mobile units and we'll at least have like one or two mechs in this area that we can stay far back enough to basically sacrifice infantry at a rate that will let us delay any captures of these properties for long enough that we can build up enough power to properly fight. And so that's why you see the copter coming out on this side. We talked about this airport being the offensive airport, this airport being the defensive airport. So now you see we're anticipating, okay, there's definitely, like, for sure there's copters, right? Coming from Lash's offensive airport. So we need the anti-air ready for that, and the copter ready for that. If need be, we can always sack the copter into the comm tower if we need to deny cap, although our infantry should be more than enough to cover that. And mech should be, this should be sufficient to deny any capture attempts on the city. And Black Boat, we salute you. So we see the recon pop go over here. We knew he was in the forest anyway because he had to be there mechanically. Now the recon sees. So I love this position, right? Because 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yep, you don't see the tank, or sorry, don't see the artillery, but you see this mech that's like, oh, wow, he's so vulnerable. He's so vulnerable. So you see now recon. Oh no. Oh no. Oh. We see a copter come through. Well, love it when a good plan comes together. So we see exactly what is happening. So we thought that there would be an all-in over here. It was very obvious that is not what is happening. And this recon tells us everything that we need to know. In fact, it is all this stuff shifting over here. Well, that's fine. It's not a problem. First of all, we still are able to capture the city. So we just take it. It belongs to us. Oh, I see. I'm waiting. I think there was a world in which I potentially gave up this capture to fight better. All we're going to do is we're going to trade copters. We're going to trade them. We're going to trade them slowly. And you send in a copter, I send in a copter. You send in a copter, I send in a copter. Who do you think's going to run out of copters first? Probably not the person who's up 4K in income. So happy to trade copters all day. Artillery so like this mech got great value because it led to a tank dying. So now we secure the income advantage. Now we're leveraging our information and positioning to transition that into an army, like a victory in the battle. More mechs on properties. We see this. And what's funny is that because the tank was here the previous turn, so you couldn't capture it. or she couldn't capture it. And then now we see all the stuff shifting this way. So now we can just keep denying this city. Like, we can send in 1 infantry per turn, and we will delay this city basically forever, because we know that all the vehicles are going down here. And we might lose more infantry in the long run, but now it's not 4K. Now it's 5K. We're going to be up 5K on day 12. And finish the capture. And now, unfortunately, we kind of committed a lot to this side. And now we kind of rather wish it was over here. So we have to kind of reorient. But it's very obvious where the fight's going to take place. So we just want to make sure as much of our stuff is in position as possible. And all this stuff is here. We just want to set up for a counterattack. This right here is a really big mistake by my opponent. These infantry are useless. I know where they are. They can never join the fight, which means it's just going to be Lash vehicles. If the fight happens, Lash vehicles are going to be crashing into a lot of my infantry. That's not what you want. You want your vehicles with your infantry fighting infantry, so that you have vehicles left over to run into their vehicles. But because these infantry are so far back, they can't participate in the fight. And if they can't participate in the fight, then they might as well not exist. So these are 3 infantry that basically do nothing, or they can't do anything next turn at least. And we're ready to counterattack with as much stuff as we can muster. We got money, so buy T-copters. Now we have 3 transports. It's out of control. That was actually, I'm not going to complain about rolls, but I'm lying. This was like a 40% to one-shot my copter. And it actually kind of matters a little bit, because if the 40% didn't happen, then this copter would have to spend an attack on clearing the 1 HP copter. But since it dies, this guy can basically clear off the 2 HP mech. But it ends up being kind of a big deal. It's not like a huge deal, but it's obnoxious. So this is that Lash power, where tanks on cities can one-shot infantry on planes. So this is what Lash is like trying to get to happen. Lash is trying to find situations like this where you can one-shot infantry on planes. So now a lot of mechs are gone. Now the recon is able to take a pot shot on my artillery, so does manage to wall break me, but nothing left to take care of these 2 mechs. This is a join cap on the city, which never, ever, ever is going to go through. I'm too well prepared for that. I was never going to be losing the infantry fight with these 2 recons up here, knowing that everything's down here now. We do see a lot of infantry show up, though. Okay, well, we're at 5K, and despite our opponent going for these 2 captures, after this turn, I'm still going to be at 5K, that's for sure. And this is actually probably a CO power turn. We know that the black boat's still in the HQ. No need to try and play for the HQ yet, and we don't even need Victory March to secure us an income advantage because we're so far ahead. So literally all we just need to do is not decisively lose this fight, and the income will start to do fun things for us if things stabilize where they're at. So we're just going to power. And we're going to fight. We see the anti-air here. But we really want to get value out of this copter. Because then we can use the anti-air to clear stuff here. There's a lot of infantry up here. And there had to be a lot of infantry up here the whole time because we saw so few infantry down here. They had to be somewhere, right? So it's not too surprising to see a whole ton of them up there. But we can actually protect this copter behind blocker units so that we don't care about this anti-air. It's a one-shot. Sami. Pretty good. That's that 2 comm towers and a CO power means Sami infantry, one-shot enemy infantry on roads or shoals. Or at least, I guess technically it was a roll, but it's like 90%. Clear out those 2 guys. Recon onto the city. And now we're just trying to do as much damage with our infantry as possible. Playing a numbers game. We can block the anti-air with the APC, so this guy cannot hit my copter anymore. We go in here and we get a terrible roll. I forget what it was, but it was like... It should have been like 8-4, but it's whatever. And this recon goes in. So we see some new units here, but it doesn't matter because this just gives us the opportunity to continue trading copters. And additionally, our mechs are going to get hits on tanks. So 4 HP artillery, still really good because it enables me to remove that tank on the city in 2 attacks. So even if this artillery is at full HP, it would still take me 2 attacks. So 4 HP artillery, just as good as a 10 HP artillery in this particular situation. Mechs. They're crazy. That was actually only possible because of the counterattack from my 1 HP mech on that tank. Because otherwise it would have done like 99 or something like close to killing, but not. But actually there was a little chip damage on the tank. So that means I can kill the recon because I've got 2 comm towers and a CO power. So that tank is just going to guarantee one hit kill the recon. And yeah, kind of unlucky to not kill the copter. I think we had a chance to kill it. Maybe we weren't unlucky, but it was like, I think it was like a 20 or 30% chance to kill the copter, even at 3, because it had to be like really low. I forget all the details. I did the math when I did the turn. There was a chance. Yeah, so we are overextended here, which is not great. But everything that is fighting here has gotten a lot of value. So it's kind of okay if all this stuff gets smashed. And it could definitely get smashed because Lash is going to get superpower this turn. But as long as we don't get smashed to the point where we start being under threat of like losing some of these properties, it doesn't matter because they already got their value in and our transports are still alive. So we're going to be able to, if we keep trading mechs for tanks, it's going to be good. It's going to be good. We're just walling. Again, trying to keep these infantry as useless as possible just by being out of range. Sami with money. It's crazy. Double copter, double mech. Mechs, they're being able to build essentially 4 vehicles. I mean, I know mechs don't move like vehicles, but mechs with transports can at least get to the front lines as fast as vehicles. Being able to build 4 vehicles in a turn is ridiculous. Sami's a good CO. When the snowball starts rolling, this is why Lash has to win. Because once the game gets like this, the game is hard. Yeah, superpower time. Kind of interesting, actually, that the tank decided to go into my tank instead of the mech. You might think that like the tank is more valuable, but the mech does way more damage. It's probably better to get rid of the mech, honestly. Repairs the copter, which is kind of an interesting decision. Lash being down 5k probably shouldn't be repairing 1 HP copters. Like realistically, what is this 2 HP copter going to contribute? And your funds are so strained because of the income difference that you probably need every cent that you can put together. But anyway, still more copter trading. We are more than happy to just continue sending copter into copter into copter into copter into copter. So this is Lash's superpower turn. So all these units on cities with high defense are going to be very difficult to do any damage to. So we will be ignoring them. But we do have the opportunity to get some nice trades on this copter and this anti-air, so we'll do that. But everything else, like, we just play defense, and we wait for superpower to come up again, and then we just win. We get another mech value. The mechs have been really, really powerful. As soon as you don't have enough power to run over the mech snowball, they are so cost effective. And so we just retreat. We're set up in position that we can basically defend all these cities just by sending in infantry. So no need to stay overextended. We can take advantage of this choke point with the mountain to protect this copter. So now this anti-air can't actually reach the copter. We're unloading this mech in... Oh no, sorry, the mech is actually out of vision. Just kidding. No, he's in vision. What am I talking about? Yeah. We unload the mech in vision just as a failsafe. If for some reason Lash has like a tank that we didn't expect and is able to break through this recon and kills this copter, we at least then have the mech in position to counterattack the anti-air to at least get a trade out of it. Though we're pretty sure that there's no extra tanks floating around. And now we position everything kind of back here to make this tank useless. Because we don't really have anything super great to fight against this tank. Because our copters are pretty vulnerable to the anti-air. But if we just leave, then the tank can't do anything. And this is our tech turn. So when you have 25k, you can just buy Neo tanks whenever you feel like it. The plan here is we have like a million ways to close out the game, but pretty much all of them involve waiting for superpower. One of the ways that we can win is we can build a battleship here, and the battleship can actually hit the black boat on the HQ. And we've got enough money to like get up to battleships pretty easily. So That's definitely something that we're going to start looking at. But we're at 25K, and little known fact, the capture limit on this map is 30, which means we actually only need 5 more cities in order to just win. So what's funny is that we don't actually need to go for the HQ, because if you look up here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so the 5 cities remaining up here, all we need to do is just set up in this area here and wait for superpower, and then we're probably going to win by cap limit. So we're just kind of playing this one out. As long as we don't do anything like insanely throwy, we continue to fight until we get enough charge, and then there's going to be a lot of different ways that we can close it out pretty quickly. Okay, this is a pretty simple turn. This guy is overextended, and we can be extremely rude by moving the copter here. And obviously the copter here is at risk of a copter built from this airport. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But we've got a recon, and we can just block. But first, we're going to get rid of this anti-air with our beat-up units. This mech, he's out of ammo. We salute you, mech. Thank you for your glorious service. And we know that there's really unlikely for there to be any way that this gets punished. Worst thing that can happen is if there was a copter built last turn, maybe it runs into my recon there. We can prepare for that. We're prepared for that. Recon here. All this stuff is pretty far back. So yeah, we're just like, we're fine with the situation. We just set up around here and trade until superpower. And that's going to be enough, most likely. So we're just going to set up for that. Also, the Neo tank. This guy is basically here to try and invite an attack. So this guy. So we remember we said that Lash really wants to be able to put tanks on cities to be able to one-shot infantry on planes. This is my bait infantry in hopes that Lash will see this infantry there, clear it off, and then put a tank on the city, because then the Neo tank will be ready for that. Yeah, we're just chilling. We don't even need to extend beyond this line, because from here we can just defend these properties. No way we're going to lose them. Not a chance. Just Sami things. Copter, mech with 3 transports, and I'm saving 6K. Crazy. Saxon infantry. Copter comes in. And there's the tank. Love it when a good plan comes together. Oh, there's a copter hitting the recon. And we see the anti-air come up here. So I think the idea is like, okay, you can't trade into my copter because I'll hit you with the anti-air. But we're ready for that. This turn pretty much plays itself. We're just trading. Kind of unlucky roll there. Like really unlucky, actually. But we got a lot of stuff here. We got a lot of stuff here. And now the moment we've all been waiting for. That's right. We got a battleship. I'm pretty sure this is the second time I've unironically made a battleship in a game. And for some reason, they've both been as Sami. I think there's a test game a while ago on Warp Streams, I think was the map. An earlier version of that map that ended up building a battleship. But this is legitimately like really strong. Obviously, there's no way that anything can touch the combination of a Neotank and a battleship on that front. And the charge is now starting to build up. So this is... If this is not an instant resign, this is over in the next turn or two for sure. Okay, big attack incoming here. My infantry are getting wiped out pretty hard. It's a little bit of a positioning snafu, I would say. You get some tanks wiped out. Copter comes in, kills my T-copter, which is... Oh, sure. And now a CO power. Out of desperation, I presume. Not a terrible fight. And that anti-air is actually able to one-shot the infantry on the tower, which is pretty crazy. And the black boat finally moves off the HQ on day 16. And that's the end. Definitely was... the game was ending next turn. No matter what. There's like a million ways for me to get to 5 properties. I can't get the I can't get the HQ, but I can get 5 properties a ton of different ways. And just a cursory look, I kill this infantry. These 2 infantry go to these 2 cities, so that's 2 of them. So then I need... Well, so this infantry can go to this city. Well, these 2 guys are going to get loaded up and unloaded here. To see, so I would get vision of the city. If we turn on the lights, we know that the city is undefended. So that just means that I would need to get any 2 cities up here, which means all I need to do is clear this copter somehow. And there's a lot of potential ways to do that. And then I need to... I'd have to get an additional 20k charge, but there's anti-airs that I can sack copters into, so it would not be difficult to make that happen. So yeah, would have for sure gotten capture limit next turn, but GG's. This game was a lot of fun. This is one of those rare situations where I have like this vision for what I think the game could turn out to be, and then it turns exactly into what I had envisioned. It's actually crazy like how much went exactly according to plan this game. I don't think my opponent really made like any massive mistakes per se. It's just that this build is insanely sharp. And in order to counter it, you almost need to know what to do from the start. But if you've never seen the build before, how would you know? and nobody's seen the build before. So I don't know. I felt really, really good about this build going into this match, and it lived up to everything. So GG's, that'll be the end of round 3, moving on to round 4. I anticipate that we'll have a while to wait for that one to get going. Let's why don't we have a look at the full vision recap to see if there's anything interesting that we can see here. So you can see the black boat chilling on the HQ the whole time. Oops. Yeah, like look at all these infantry kind of hidden this way. So there really was not a whole lot. And this infantry captured the comm tower pretty early. Probably earlier than it needed to, potentially. Because, yeah, this is captured. But there's not going to be any fighting for, like, 2 more turns. So, and now he's stuck. So, yeah, so many infantry down in this corner. But then there ends up not really being too much fighting there. It's really difficult when you get to this turn. And you're committing a decent amount to here. But you're really low on infantry. Because you're, like, look at all this infantry. All of it's over here, and then you immediately lose your first 2 infantry for free on your weak side. It's so difficult to recover from that, because you just can't contest anything. You can't really slow down the captures with your own infantry, so you have to either give it up or commit vehicles, which then would just get your vehicles killed as well. So, I mean, from day 10, like, it sounds ridiculous, but by the time day 10 rolls around with how this plays out, like, unless I really screw something up, or unless Lash, like, really is able to manufacture something, this game it's totally cooked. There's just no way back. It doesn't matter how well you're able to play, or if you have, like, really good tactics or anything like that. Like, you're down 4K to a Sami as an aggro CO that has to snowball, and it's just totally unplayable from that point. And it may have looked like Lash was kind of running headfirst into every single trap that I set the entire game. And there's some level of truth to that, but the reality is that you have to make something happen. Because if you don't try something, then the default board state, once you get down 5Ks, you're going to bleed out the longer the game goes without changing the status quo. So there's no, I don't think you should look at what my opponent did and be like, wow, it's, they made, like, really bad moves starting from day 11, and they fought really badly. Like, that's not the right way to look at it. Like, they had to try something, even if it was unlikely to work, because if they don't try anything, it's just gonna, instead of what we saw, it's the game slows down, and then there's a battleship on day 15, and then there's a superpower victory march getting the HQ by, like, day 16 or something like that. So there's you're choosing from only bad options, and that's how it goes. So anyway, this was a really fun game though for me. I had a blast this game. This is, I think, one of the best games that I've maybe ever put together from start to finish. I'm just really, really pleased with how it went, and with the concept, because the meta was so Lash heavy going into this game. And whenever you pick into a CO that nobody's picking, you always have to, like, second guess yourself, like, am I really right about what I think about this map? Is everybody wrong? Is it just me? And you kind of put yourself on a limb out there. And it would have been very easy to opt into the Lash mirror on this map, as many other people have done. No shame in that. But I wanted to to do something exciting, to give everybody a fun game to look at. And I have a feeling that after this video comes out, the meta is going to be a little bit different. Although I think round 3 is pretty deep into the games already, so we'll see. I've already started to see a few more Sami picks showing up, so we'll best of luck to all the Samis. We'll see how you do without the element of surprise if you're trying to copy this build. We'll see how it goes. But yep, that's going to wrap it for this one. Other things going on. We are still waiting on the Smacking Cup 3 finals. I don't want to speculate too much about what's going on, but I have some ideas about how it's going. But obviously, it's a little bit hard to tell just going on what you see in the fog. But I'm pretty sure I know what's going to be happening there. So we'll see how that one goes when it happens. But you never know, and I have a feeling the finals will be a long game, at least in terms of real time. So, that being said, Smacking Cup 5 will continue. We'll keep playing. We gotta wait for sure. There's at least 2 rounds of games that need to be played in order to free up an opponent for round 4. And one of the games is moving along pretty slowly, so it might be a little bit. So we'll see when next game ends up being played. I've been toying around with the idea of maybe either dipping my toes back into Global League, or maybe doing some like streams where I do some like replay reviews that's a little more casual. So let me know in the comments if somehow you're still around at this point of the video and you think that's interesting. I've done streaming for a long time, I've never done it for Advance Wars really. But it's something that I could definitely do. I've never really done it with YouTube actually. I've done it with Twitch, but it's always been for Zelda stuff. Other things, I think this is a long shot, but there is a gaming event coming up in late October called Speed Gaming Live in Northern Virginia, if you are in that area, or if you are able to travel to the area. It is primarily a speedrunning event. A lot of Zelda games get speedrun there. It's a competition as well. But there's a lot of casual tournaments and things like that. If that sounds interesting to you, then you can check out their website. The website is sglive.speedgaming.org. I'll try to remember to put a link in there in the description. Anyway, the reason I'm saying this is I will be there. So if by chance you happen to be there and you want to say hi, then that will be a good chance to do that. I probably will be playing Ocarina of Time Randomizer there, depending on childcare. We will see. Playing a rando tournament is always a big time commitment, so I don't know if I'll actually be able to commit to it, but we'll see how things shake out. But yeah, that's gonna be it for me. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed this one. I had fun bringing it to you, and we'll see you in the next game. See you next time.